That was number 11. Now for number 12. Interdependence. Interdependence. What's your goal here?
This goes back to the key lesson here. We are fellow workers with Christ and with Christ in others. So when we talk about working, collaborating with other members of the body, really I'm collaborating with Christ in you, and you're collaborating with Christ in me,
Right.
just expressed differently through different gifting.
Right.
All right? And just like he says in Ephesians, if you'll turn there, this is such a good epistle because it's written to the church. It's the church epistle. This is how you do church. This is how the church functions. This is what the church, that to which the church is called. So I want to show you in Ephesians chapter 4, verse 11, my idea here. So I'm going to read it in context. Starting in verse 11, he says, "And he himself gave some to be apostles, some prophets, some evangelists, some pastors and teachers, for the equipping of the saints, for the working of the ministry, for the edifying of the body of Christ, till we all come to the unity of the faith and of the knowledge of the Son of God, to a perfect man," or a perfect church, perfect humanity,
Right.
"to the measure of the stature of the fullness of Christ, that we should no longer be children, tossed to and fro, and carried about with every wind of doctrine, by the trickery of men, and cunning craftiness of deceitful plotting, but speaking the truth in love, may grow up in all things to him who is the head, Christ, from whom," Christ that is, "the whole body, joined and knit together by what every joint supplies, according to the effective working by which every part does its share, causes," this is my favorite part, "growth of the body for the edifying of itself in love." Okay? That right there says that we're dependent on one another.
Right.
In order for this body to grow up into the fullness of the stature of Christ,
Everybody has to.
it requires all of us
Right.
bringing what we have, what God has placed in us, to bear on the work of the ministry. And so if the work is to be accomplished, we have to learn that we are dependent on one another.
That's right.
Not independent, interdependent. You and I are dependent on each other, but we're ultimately dependent upon Christ, with whom we co-work
Right.
and do work. So that is kind of the idea here of interdependence. Americans in particular, Westerners more generally, Western Europe and over to America, we have this idea of independence, that we can do it on our own, and we can be the Lone Ranger, the Knight Rider, the Superman, the Batman, the whatever. This stuff is flashed in front of our face constantly, that we need to be independent. That's incorrect. Christianity teaches us to be interdependent. That just comes from the history of thought, the Age of Enlightenment, where people wanted to do their own thing, and they wanted there to be free thinkers. And we want to not be told what to think, and not be told what we need. We need ourselves, and we can think it through ourselves. And we, the people, hold these truths to be self-evident. That's dependent on self. You know, that's Age of Enlightenment talk. That's the idea of independence, and Christianity challenges that. Christianity, the Bible, has a debate with that type of thinking.
Right.
From the Old to New Testament, ancient Israel was interdependent on one another. Okay, the priesthood was dependent upon one another. The people depended on the priesthood, who depended on God. And the leaders depended on Moses, and Moses depended on the leaders to whom he delegated tasks. Same thing in the church. He's telling us, depend on me, but depend on each other, because in order to grow, you need each other, and you need me. That's what I'm trying to express here.
Interdependence, it is very key that we can't on our own. Like when a couple of years ago, I started to reach a conclusion. Because I love to study anything like
Me
in
too.
church and out of church, but it doesn't matter how much individually we study sometimes and have truths. Is I still need even something that I'm studying. I need you to explain it in a way that I really get it.
Right.
So I started to say to the church that guess what? I realized that I can't get where I need to go, or this church can't get where we need to go until we all work together. So guess what? I'm going to spend more time instead of all the studying that I would normally do. It shifts your focus sometimes that you don't only go study man or do other things that help you.
Sure.
Right?
Absolutely.
And make you look smart and good and whatever that is. But I actually need to shift my focus and my time then on what things show interdependent, where it may even, a thing that takes me days to study, you can explain to me in 5 minutes,
Correct.
right?
And
So-
this is part of the design
right.
that God, how God made us and made our church. We're made to be communicators. We're made to be interdependent. You know, we're not made to be independent.
Right.
That's why in the very beginning, that's why Eve was brought to Adam.
Right.
You know, they had to be dependent upon one another, and they had to be dependent upon God. And the minute they went away from God, chaos was created and a gap was created between the two of them. They started to blame. Eve started to blame Adam, the serpent, everything. You know, so we need to consider that stuff and really take dependence on one another seriously.
Right.
So we'll grow that way.
So you touched on some points in the lesson here, which ints me to ask this question. So, what role is there for leadership in the church at the conference level, and at the district, and in the churches to help to facilitate interdependence?
Well, you just said it right there. I agree. A pastor shepherds the flock and keeps the flock together and leads out in front. Doesn't mean he's independent, because the pastor is still, the shepherd is still dependent on the sheep in the church, that is. You know, even shepherds from antiquity were dependent. The sheep, that was their bartering system. That was their business, to be shepherds. So they depended on the sheep, and the sheep depended on them. There was still an interdependence there, but the shepherd has a job of keeping people together, keeping them interdependent, promoting gifts, showing how much we need one another. And that's kind of the role for leadership there. I don't think leadership is excluded. Leadership is a part of that,
Right.
and involved in it.
Right.
So,
Cool. Thank you.
work really hard to make these videos possible, and so I'm going to ask you to give. We need donations to keep these things going. They're great helps for the Sabbath School Quarterlies, and as a 21st century vibrant church, we need to have videos. We need to be online. We need to reach people that way, because we're in a technological age. And this is how you meet the needs of the people, doing things like this. So I am going to ask, even though I'm not governing over this and not a manager or anything, I'm just one of the grunts. I know how much this cost, and I encourage you to find some way to contribute, some kind of contribution, some kind of donation. It will really go a long way.